What's up, AP US History students? Mr. Abajian here. Today we're talking about historical thinking skills. So for this video, I'm going to need you to get out your giant pink skills packet. And what I'd like you to open up to is the two handouts here. It's the one that's got the 8 themes with the historical thinking skills. And then you can flip around and also find this one, which is a thinking skills visual page that's here that's going to be super helpful as we talk through this. Feel free also to take some notes as we're going through this to help you complete your assignments when it comes to historical thinking skills. So let's recap and see how this all fits together once again. So far what we've done is we have talked through themes in this class, overarching ideas for the course as a whole. If you're thinking, where is that? That's the bagpipes part that we're talking about here that we've been using in class. So bagpipes, themes to bring it all together, plus specific events in U.S. history, which are a key context to study them with theme and context. So just as a reminder, if we're going to the key concepts that the College Board wants you to know, this holds us accountable, like you can see, key concept 1.1, right? Holding us accountable to going over some of the Native American populations and how they've adapted to their environments. This is the content we need to know. The last part that we have not talked through is the skill part. It's the last thing to get at the learning objective so that you're successful on that A-push exam here. And today, that is what we're going to get into and how historians investigate and reason about this phenomenon. So let's give you an example here. Like if we're talking about American and national identity, we're going to pair it up when it comes to period 5, key concept 5.1.1, right? And then we're adding that skill, which you're going to be able to use in order to argue, in order to reason. And so let's jump into this. How is this going to impact your writing and understanding of history? Well, here's what we're going to start with. And this is also, by the way, in your pink packet, is your rubric for your long essay. And I'm going to show you how the writing rubric that controls how the College Board is going to score your essays is tied into your historical thinking skills. So let's take a look first. If we scroll down here, what I first want to work on with the historical thinking skills today is your analysis and reasoning. You're going to notice you're going to get a point for some historical reasoning skills that deal with comparison, causation, and continuity and change over time. Your essay has to be structured around one of those 3 reasoning skills. And this is what I want to take just a teeny bit of time to dive into to make sure that we understand it. So, what are we talking about with historical reasoning processes? How historians think about putting together all historical thinking skills to identify and explain patterns and connections between historical events and developments. How do we do that? The very first one that we're going to tackle is comparison. Okay? If I get a comparison prompt, it's going to be a Venn diagram that I'm going to end up creating before I write on my topic, where we're dividing it up by themes, and essentially what we're looking at is comparing the difference between one another. How is one development like or unlike another development in the same time? So how is it similar or different? How does it affect the groups in different ways or similar ways? And how does that viewpoint compare with another when discussing the same event or historical development? So for example, if we're using football, there's American football, and then there's football, as in we know it in the U.S. as soccer. What's similar? What's different? That's where I'm able to put things into a Venn diagram when it comes to that comparison. So this is one of the reasoning skills, one of the ways you're going to be setting up your essays and looking at what is similar, what is different. If I'm taking a look at this visually, by the way, and scrolling down here, comparison, you're not just focusing in on what is similar, what's different. Here's the key. Why are they similar? Why are they different? That is getting at some deep AP level knowledge that's there. So that's the first historical thinking skill, reasoning skill, specifically found in your essays. The next one, causation. You're like, Bieber man here. Yeah. Like, what caused this little innocent kid from Canada to be this huge pop icon, land himself in jail in some trouble, tattoo himself up, mainstream. Why did the event happen? That's what we're talking about with causation. So in history, we're looking at what is the cause, what's the impact. It could be short term, it could be long term. What's the most significant? And a lot of the times when we're talking about causation, we're usually ranking, saying what are the biggest reasons to cause something, what are the biggest effects. And at this point, unlike similarity and difference, where in your argument you're going to tell me, is it more similarities or more differences? In this case, for a historical thinking skill with causation, you're going to be ranking them based off that topic. If I'm going back, by the way, to the visuals that I have here, I want to think cop, robber. There's multiple causes why the robber that led to the effects with the cop chasing him. Keep in mind, nothing happens in isolation. It can be either short-term or long-term when it comes to causation. That's here. All right, so what causes things to happen? Finally, the very last historical thinking skill, as far as reasoning skills go, is one of my favorites. It's continuity and change over time. Batman, gotta love DC, that's here. You're going to notice Batman in the early 30s versus Batman with what you get today, a little Arkham Asylum that's going on, that's there. And you're going to notice the progression of the Batman. From the black and white to the very toned suit that's there. What stayed the same? Why did it change over a given period of time? Why did it change and how much did it change? When we're talking about continuity and change over time, we want to trace something throughout history. Did it stay the same or change? In this regard, when I'm setting it up for an essay, I want you to think of a timeline where you're tracing a bunch of series of events and then seeing, did it change more or did it change less? And when I get a chance to take a look at the visual in that case, I want you to think of a fence post. And usually I like students starting from the very end date and working their way all the way back that's there, kind of like a fence post that's there. And then there's different events, which are the kind of wires that sometimes stay in a long pattern, so continuity, or maybe they veer off, the change that's there. So again, once we're talking about the writing part that's here, right, continuity, change, over time, causation, comparison, those are your reasoning skills of how you're going to set up your essay, and that is going to be based specifically off of the essay prompt that you get. So I'm going to put you a little bit to the test here. I've got 3 historical thinking skill prompts that are here. What I want you to do is in just a second pause the video and figure out, is it continuity and change over time, causation, or comparison? So go ahead, pause that video now. Okay, hopefully you figured it out. Let's take a look here to figure out which of the 3. Boom. First one's causation, because we're talking about an action that's taking place here with American Indians and what led or shaped those relationships. That's the key word that's there. Continuity and change over time, what we're taking a look at is how things evolved. Usually you can see it when we're talking about evolved or changed. And then comparison, you can tell role of religion with the Spanish is similar. That's the key word that gives it away. That's there. So these are your reasoning skills. Now you'll notice, by the way, that is purely essay-based that's here. But Abajian, if I'm taking a look at the other historical thinking skills, like on this page in my cheat sheet or in my pink packet that's here, that's just one of the parts. Let me talk you through a couple of the other skills that we'll be going through in class as well to get you on the same page. Let's start with this. We're going to go down to the bottom one, argumentation. This is the key part in your writing that you will do for me for the rest of the year, is that you're going to develop a complex argument that's here. Essentially, it's going to start with your thesis, where you're going to respond to a historically defensible claim or thesis, so that's your line of reasoning or argumentation, and then you can expand upon it through a number of this series of things that you see here. All right, it can be periodization, it can look at validating arguments, what's relevant, what have you seen throughout, but really it's just writing a solid argumentative essay that's here. When we're talking about argumentation, by the way, think of it like your late night talk shows or some of your social dialogue and media commentary, where you're taking a claim, your thesis, supporting it with specific evidence. And if you're noticing, by the way, to make complex arguments, you got to have the evidence that's built in here, right? It's your argument and how those proper nouns relate to that argument, that thesis, that claim that you're making. So that's a key part that's there. If I continue to take a look, by the way, at my historical thinking skills, let's go up to contextualization. This is huge for what we do for our writing specifically that's here. With contextualization, I want you to think of events that are surrounding or things that are surrounding an event. Nothing happens in isolation. Nothing's a vacuum. So it's almost like Star Wars, where when you're watching Star Wars, the first title screen comes on, and you have this scrolling line of dialogue and text that sets you up for the story that you're about to jump in. So what is surrounding? What's happening around it? It's kind of like if you're watching a TV show like Game of Thrones, right? Like you are about to jump into an episode, and right before that they play the previously on, and they tell you kind of what happened in the previous episode. Or, hey, next time in this TV show, this is what's going to happen. For contextualization, when we get there, what I want to know is you might be talking about an event, but I want to know what's surrounding that. What happened previously on? What happened after that? What's taking place to put us into that story? When we're talking about it in visuals, I want you to think of it more like a tree, not just about the event, right? I don't want that specific proper noun event, but local settings like the soil and water, or global like the sun. It's that turning point. What is taking place surrounding that event? Now, if that's contextualization, we're going to find that, by the way, as well in our writing prompt that's here, of that broader historical context that's involved. Continuing to move on with our historical thinking skills, and we'll work through these quite quickly. Development and process, basically what we're talking about here is it's fairly simple, but we're looking at the who, what, where, when. This is the most basic level of historical skill thinking, identifying certain things. Who's George Washington? How did he become the first president? The who, what, where, when, why part of this with proper nouns specifically. Again, when we're talking about it with our visual pictures here, it's just level 1 type information that we're talking about. You need to know the basics. This is where the flashcards come in, and knowing some of those proper nouns. Now, if we're jumping up just a little bit more with that, though, we're also going to deal with documents in this class. And we're going to use primary sources coming out of the actual events that were closely tied to it, or the arguments that historians have made, which are secondary sources. And we're going to use something called HIPPY, tools that you'll need to be able to take a look through documents. Now, when we talk about documents that are here, if I'm taking a look at an AP exam, documents mean when I'm writing a DBQ, and we'll get to this in class, that you're going to have to break down some of these primary source documents or historical documents that are written by historians on their takes, and you're going to have to give me kind of the HIPPY, the intended audience, historical context, and a number of other things. So it's kind of almost like a Pokemon in a sense, where we're talking about how you're going to use these to break down documents and help you out. And so I'm going to give you all of these to be able to use that in the skills. And finally, claims and evidence and sources. When we're talking through something like that, essentially what we're doing is we're going to extract useful information, make supportive inferences, and drawing appropriate conclusions from historical evidence. So usually it's a comparison of two source arguments. So for example, once again, if I get it to the AP exam that's here, one of the short answer questions is usually going to pair two historians together, and they're going to ask you major differences and then one historical event or fact that supports it. This is exactly what we're talking about when we're looking at claims and evidence and sources. So I want to see some important information, some arguments people are making, your own arguments as well. Do you support it? Can you modify it? Can you refute it? So I hope this gives you an idea as we go through historical thinking skills to be able to knock out not just identifying them in your essay prompts like you see here, but also being able to use them throughout the AP course. All right, everybody, I hope this helped, and can't wait to see what you give me when it comes to historical thinking skills. Thanks.